can I do that myself? Yeah. I think this works, and I think spectrum. If you look right behind the column right here, you might lose the toolbars.
What size did you say? 5.5 by 7?
Yeah, 5.5 by 7.5.
7.5.
Yeah.
I had a 7.5. Did not redo it.
It's like 4 times as. To get it to.
Okay.
That's it.
5 by 5?
5.5.
These are 5.5 by 7.5.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just labeling the actual. I can drive it if you want to talk through it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess the visual difference that I think you might have noticed with the photos, right? Did you when you look at the 16 photos all together, do you see 16 are the same, or you see some difference? What's different? Okay, yeah, so the shadows, but what does the shadow do in terms of the legibility? Easier to read? Okay, so yeah, so it moves, and when it moves, it actually highlights perhaps, or voids certain details, right? But now that you have four photos of the same thing, but just rotated, right? Are you amazed like how much difference you can actually achieve, or no? Maybe the later one, right? Like steepest angle, you get the biggest difference. Is that right? Right. So noonish, maybe less. Right. So one is what we've done with previous exercise on the photo. We're asked you to identify 3 issues, right, on where you place your points, right? If you did that 17 times, you wouldn't find 17 of the same responses, right? We talked about that. We're all looking at the same image, but we actually have difference. It's along the same line, photographing the same thing, but one variable changing, allowing us to actually see it differently. Yeah? And I think that speaks about a critical issue with sight, place in general, or the environment that we find ourselves, is that time is the one constant that will change the way we read things. As simple or as mundane as sometimes this is exposed to sunlight, and sometimes this is in the shadow or in the shade, right? But it's also something that we can predict. We're very good with understanding where the sun rises and where it sets, right? If there's one thing you can count on, is that sun will set where? Right? And then within the west, we have some seasonal change or adjustment and the angle of it. Have you guys talked about this in ES? What's ES?
Environmental system.
Okay, that's a translation. What do you talk about? Have you talked about the sun?
Yeah, we
No?
did last year what's called the the device, I forgot what it's called. Heliodome.
Yeah.
Heliodome?
Yep.
You guys done a heliodome?
Yeah,
Really?
yeah, this is what we built last year.
You built it last time? Was Khalifa the only one in class?
Vertical system 2, I don't know.
Oh, you're doing 2.
No, I'm done with 2.
You're done with 1, but they're in 1.
Oh.
You're in 2?
Because, yeah. That's,
Do you know in what class you're in? Aren't you guys in environmental systems 1? So majority. Some of you are in 2. Some of you are in 2.
Yeah, good to know.
Oh, good to know.
Good to know how many you have ahead of you.
I was just confused between architecture studies and
Okay. No, I'm serious. So I'm gonna assume you guys are in ES1, the majority. 1. Okay. You talk about the sun yet?
No, yeah.
What did you talk about?
We talked about carbon, coal, and the effect on the world stage.
Oh, the climate.
Yeah.
Yeah. How much we're screwed?
Oh, yeah. In a nutshell, right?
We talked about the same plan of fixing that within the next 10 years and stuff.
Oh, you're already on the optimistic end again. It's like doomsday. We're all screwed if we continue to do what we're doing, right? But we're going to fix it. Okay, we're going to fix it. Cool. Okay. I think the ES classes always do that. It's good. Yeah. But anyway, so I just want to make sure you guys catch up to the sun, like actually getting into specifics. You'll see the overlaps and the coordination of the classes, and that's what it's intended to. ES1 will primarily deal with the issues overall, but it's also going to talk about passive systems. Okay. Heard of that term before? I swear, I'm going to get you guys to talk at some point.
passive system.
Yeah, passive? What's passive versus active? Actually, both use energy, but they manage it differently. Yeah. One is energy with energy, and the other is actually passive in terms of it capitalizes on what's already there, right? Like heat gain, shade orientation, cross ventilation, right? Those are kind of passive in nature. You don't need a vent again. You don't need photovoltaic cells, geothermal wells, all that. Yeah? So 201 will be all passive systems. Okay, so in preparation of this, your sight, your observation was a form of a passive observation that in a way registered how something moves along the sky and how you can actually track it. So what we're about to start here is the Illustrator component on how to organize your information, how to manage the pieces, and what to do with it. So again, this will be available to you, but I highly encourage you to actually build it from scratch or to try to do it, right? If you fail, you can always go back to the template, right? But you won't. So
Optimistic.
yeah.
Yep. Just get it set up. Almost there.
Do you want what worked best with one off, the front off, and the
Yeah, I
all
think
of them off?
sometimes we need some
The
of them
risk
off,
is
right?
both off, then
Sleep time.
sleep mode. Like in airplanes, you know, there's like nighttime.
That's it.
Is that good?
Can you guys? It's
Yeah.
easy for you guys to see.
Yeah.
Can you see or no? Yeah.
Yes.
I trust you. I don't know what you're seeing versus what I'm seeing. This works.
Where do you want to start? On the photos?
Yeah.
So this is the organization. I guess I should look at better photos, huh?
What's that?
Better photos,
Better photos.
right?
Okay,
Go
good.
back, and
And
then
it-
go
so-
to output, and then you go down to that web photo file, and then those are all.
Yeah. Okay. So here, and I think this is a good example, right? Let's say everyone has different ways of or building nomenclatures of like how to bunch stuff, right? And I think that's what we've just seen with Christian's case is that it went through a cycle of editing already, right? Like, and I think that's the right mode to say I'm going to shoot 500 photos and I'm going to distill it down to the 16 that I think I can work with, right? That I think the more you can choose from, the better in a way, right? It's like, oh, this one over this, but they might be all the same, or right, the difference. So you've already gone through and like sorted through them and then printed it. You know where to find it. What's important is that you know where to find it because it's going to come in handy once you place these guys. Yeah. Okay. Any ideas on how to organize this stuff?
It's a cool photo. But
16, just anywhere, kind of like have like put it all on top of one another.
Date them,
Right, what's that?
date them on the actual
Oh,
file
date 'em?
name, date it.
Yeah, date them. But in terms of a layout, what are the different ways you can lay them out? You go 16 in a string. What do you want? How do you want to organize this stuff? What will be useful?
Break it down into the times that you took on.
Okay.
So you have 4 groups, 4 different time periods, and then however you rotated your image, you do it in that sequence.
Okay. Right. So it's sort of maybe keeping the things together that share the same time. Right. Like the same time, and then maybe in another direction will be in terms of its orientation. Right. To observe that the same orientation or the orientation that was produced this photo over 4 different periods of time, how it might have changed. So the important part here with any of this stuff is actually to track difference or change. Right, so, right, 2 rows, one is about time and one is about placement perhaps, right? Or positioning. Now, one thing you want to ask yourself too is the 4, at one particular time you had 4 different photos, but it was oriented differently, right? It was rotating. As a collection, do we keep them all in the same orientation or do we actually rotate them so you can see the difference? We actually made that call already, but obviously you have choices here. We're going to argue for they're all the same orientation in order to evaluate what the change is. So if you have them, so part of it is going to be rotating it back to its original. There's a kind of 0 to it. Right? And then bringing it into Illustrator. So Mike, they're all in one location, we can bring it in and do the clipping mask? Or do you want to talk about the setup first?
we can do it either way. We can talk about the black and white issue, the cropping issue, automation,
Yeah.
and then we can bring it in maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to...
Sure.
We can, let's do the black and white maybe.
Okay.
If you want to do Photoshop.
Yeah. So that's like 2 big things that we need to address are, this is the photo that we grabbed as found, right? As right out of the camera, just selected as best image. So we know that we need it to be black and white, and we know that we need it to be Not necessarily a certain size, because that becomes a matter of how we position it. It says 16 different times he took the picture, right, and it's all going to be slightly off. So when we think about automation, there's no real way to automate where to crop. The cropping will happen on the Illustrator side of it, right? So one thing that we can do is we can start to look at the kind of structure of what happens here. And let's say that he has this called his better photos, right? Those are his color ones. So what I'm going to do is make a copy of that folder and paste it. I want to keep a safe copy of that whole folder. And what we're going to do is make a black and white version of it.
Right, so you always want to keep the original. That's
Yeah,
it. So
don't-
It's like you can, when all goes wrong, right? All the editing, the plugging in, the placing, you can always fall back to the original. That's the point.
And I've renamed that folder Better Photos Black and White. I'm going to close this one right here. And I should have, I think there's an automated already version for black and white. There's a preset under the batch. So let me just make sure, and then I'll tell you exactly where to go. Yeah, custom RGB to grayscale perhaps. Let's look and see what our file, yeah, our file type is RGB, so that's good. So we want to go to grayscale. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to automate the process by doing the same process for all 16 photos. We're not changing the levels. What we're doing is we're just adjusting the grayscale, because the level changes would either have to be the same for all, which we could do, or we could not level them at all. But the first thing is always the shortest route. So we don't worry about the levels. We know that it has to be black and white first, so we'll do the black and white part first, right? So I'm in my file. Under File, there's Automate and Batch. And there's a series of preset actions that can happen when you do batch editing. So there's two basic ways you can do batch editing. You can choose a default action, or you can record an action that can later be used whenever you want. And it's very much turning on the recorder, running the actions, turning off the recorder. And that's your new automation set of actions. But it's nice because some of these ones are already there for you. And in the default actions, there's one that goes from custom RGB to grayscale. So the source we want to say is the folder, right? The other option is if we had a bunch of open files, these options would be activated. We could also import files if we had another file already open, another Photoshop document open. We could also have files that are already open. So if all 16 photos were already open, this would be in there as well. We're going to say folder, and then we're going to choose the folder. Before I do that, I'm going to click this option here that says include all subfolders, because if we actually look into his folder, there's nothing in the parent folder, right? They're just 8 a.m., 12 a.m., 2 p.m., those kind of folders. So we have to say that. We have to suppress file open options dialogues, because otherwise that's going to come up every time and ask us things. We're going to suppress those color profile warnings because it's not important to us. We're going to change our destination. Instead of saying none, which just leaves it open, we're going to say save and close. So it's going to overwrite the existing file. That's why we made the copy. Good. Choose where we're going to go. We're going to go to the Photoshop, the photo print. We're going to go to our output and our black and white. We're going to confirm the location right there and hit OK. So it's bringing up, I'm saying OK. And it's doing the rest for me. Looks like those two need to be rotated, right? Overall, they look good. Nothing's falling off or anything. They're really clear. It's good. Should have suppressed this dialogue. I'm not sure why this dialogue is coming up. Should just be
It's almost better, like,
to see them.
see it.
Yeah, this is a good troubleshoot if you haven't looked at all your photos. But all I'm doing is one click instead of opening, rerunning it, and that I just ran through all of them. So now when I go into here, all my stuff will be these black and white images if I look in preview. Right. So that's the automation tool. If I was, and I don't think what we're doing really calls for a lot of fine tuning of the levels or anything like that. I think it's good to just kind of to bring them in there. One thing you have to decide is if you want to rotate the image and save it now, or do you want to rotate it in Illustrator when it's a linked file? Either one, it's up to you. It's a matter of personal preference. You can't automate it at this point for lack of time, or I would just leave this as it is and bring it into Illustrator the way it is now. You know. And in Illustrator, we've got a setup here that we just did. This is our grid of images. And we've got the spots here that are, these are 5.5 by 7. And they're laid out with each of their own layers here. Started to organize it, haven't gotten all the way through it, but 1A, you can see, is on the 1A layer. And as I click on 1B, it's on the 1B layer. And we set this up so that each layer has a path in it. And basically, when we use layers like this, we can bring in images and we can use it to mask it with the path. So I do that by deciding what my 1A is and bringing it in. So I could have either labeled this ahead of time or decide that my 8 a.m. is 1, making my first image there that. If you're saying it's sequential and you've done a good job with your previews so far, you're talking about different positions, right, for the time. So if my time is the same, then 1A is going to be here, 2A is going to be here, 3A is going to be here, 4A is going to be here, 5A is going to be here, if that's by time, right? And that
I think
folder...
we have 4 times, right? Like
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm jumping ahead. Because we did you want to talk about what the fifth one is yet?
Not yet.
Okay, not yet. Okay, so let's in your mind's eye, right? Let's not jump ahead. Let's talk about the first 4. Don't look at the man behind the curtain here. Type of thing. We're looking at those. All right. Either way, we've got 1A here. I want to make that 1A layer active right here, and I'm going to go to my file and place it. Let's look at my recent places here. Let's go to my computer and find the thumb drive. And it's right there. You can already see how helpful it is to have that, take the time to organize that. The short amount of time that takes to do that, it's great. 8 a.m. place. So it's going to come in pretty much the dead center, right? If we look at the structure here, the image is sitting into our sub layer, our 1A layer here. It's got the path underneath it. So Illustrator is very much, right? Illustrator is written by people out of layout shops. They very much made this software to act like they used to do it. So when they would frame something, you'd put it down, then you take the frame, put it on top. And they always put that kind of requisites into the structure. So when you look at the layers here, when I scroll down physically from 5E down here to 1A, 1A is sitting on top of them physically. So if it was a deck of cards, 1A would be sitting on top if we just lined them up. There's no in between on that. It's very much a hierarchy in terms of where things are, and the commands think that way. So what I want to do is I want to put my path above it. See, my path right now is white. It has a white fill, but when we talk about masks, the only thing that matters with a mask is its shape. Because once we turn it into a mask, its color, both in the fill and the stroke, they disappear. And the quick way to do that is to set it up correctly like we have. We've got 1A. When I'm picking individual objects, this button down here, which is for the make or release a clipping plane or a clipping mask, wrong software, is wrong. It's not, it says we don't have enough information. We need those two things. We need the thing to be clipped and we need the clipping mask itself. So when I select this layer, that becomes active because it knows that both of those things are available. And if you can't see it, I'll drag it up here a little bit. It's this button, this very small important button there. So when I hit that, it's clipped in there. Image itself, when I hover around there, will be outlined. And I can adjust it accordingly until it starts to fit in the proper ratio. The aspect ratio is friendly towards my model, right? Perspective is gonna throw it off a little bit, but I'm not moving the clipping path, right? I could even lock that. I'm moving the actual image itself, and the clipping path will stay there. And that's just a matter of fine-tuning it.
Yeah, so the initial setup will be to get all the images in a kind of rough shot, frame it, and then you fine-tune it, right? Because you can spend time pushing and pulling on the individual, but it might not line up with the image below. So you
don't know what you're looking at. So I've got mine pretty close here. We've got a little bit of edge on the right, but it's pretty darn close. So one thing to do in terms of scaling that I like to do is, another thing that you can do is, I've got this right here, right? I've got a path already, but what I could do is I could take this path and hold down Alt and copy that path down there and delete the one that was there. So, and I've got that locked right now, right? So I've got two paths. One is a copy of another. So if I select this one right now, unlock this one, and that's the copy, right? The original is locked right there. The reason I think about that, the path is kind of, has this kind of relationship. So actually I should have, that's a misdirect on my end. I should have actually copied both of them. Because my one basic option, right, is to just repeat this entire process for all 16. No problem. You would not be doing anything wrong, but I always try to make things as kind of consistent and save myself some time if I repeat things. So I can copy both of those objects by holding down the option into there. And what I'm doing is I'm taking those two onto my 1B layer. I'm going to lock my 1A layer, so that's gone. And I've got a copy of it right here, and I'm bringing it over. Right? Because now it's the right scale, and it might roughly get me in a closer neighborhood. This image here, if I look at it, it's right there. It's showing me up here what it is. If I do that, I can say relink and grab the next one instead. Alright, so now I've grabbed the later one and it's a little bit closer to it. I can apply that clipping mask and it's a little bit less nudging later on. If I was good at taking photos, this is basically where you're going to get paid off for being consistent. If you use a tripod, you're going to be in really good shape because you're basically going to be at the same scale the whole time. And all you've really got to do is that 3-second nudge that I just did there. Yeah. Did we lose everybody on that one? Or is that making sense?
Questions?
I think it's one of us. We're gonna, once we start doing it, know exactly where we're at.
Now's the time to ask questions. The camera's running. This is the smart way to get an answer. The hard way is to figure it out on your own. Absolutely. Let's do one from scratch. Let's do this one. Because actually, for my positioning, we got to decide if this is time right. This should actually be 2A. So let me move that down there. Get rid of that. This is all just dragging on the different layers. And this actually belongs down here because the position is the same, right? The time, the position is different. The time, see, is the same. The same length of shadows up there. So I'm going to pick this stuff that's on 2A and move it into the 2A position. You always want to have, you guys know these green objects, right? These are your smart guides. If you're used to kind of a CAD precision, that's what these smart guides are offering you. They're offering you snaps. They're under your views, and you want your smart guide checked down there at all times. Another good thing to always use if you're not sure is the Control Y, right? That puts you in outline mode, and that lets you know when things are actually outlined or not. It cuts out the artwork and everything else. So in my 2A, I'm going to apply the clipping mask. It's just a matter of having the two on the same layer, having a path, having an image, selecting that layer, and hitting the clipping mask button down there. And it's clipped down there. So you always want to spend more time on the kind of setup and construction. You can get a lot of the work done before you have any artwork in there if you understand how your drawings is set up, right? Let's do, well, we've got 8 a.m., so let's go to the next position at 8 a.m. So it'll be here. When I click on it, it's going to show me where in my frames that particular frame is, right? So this little blue is showing me that it's in 3A, right? When I don't see these little white arrows next to things, that means I don't have any art in there. This little blue is letting me know that that's in there somewhere, and I open it up, and sure enough, it's the one at the bottom. So I take that path, I'm going to drag it into 3A, like that. That's my path. I'm going to go to File. I'm going to place my image, and it's going to be my 8 a.m., my third position there. You can see it's going to come in kind of big. I'm going to rescale by grabbing a corner. I'm holding Shift. This one's flipped. You always hold Shift whenever you change anything because you want to lock the aspect ratio. If I don't hold Shift, I can do this, and the Illustrator doesn't care.
But we do.
We do, right? The other thing I can do is if it's nice and centered, if I hold Shift, it'll do it uniformly, but if I hold down Alt, it'll do it at the center. So now I'm holding down Alt and Shift, and it's doing it from the center of the object. I need to rotate this guy. So if I go to a corner here, I'll see the rotation icon. I hold down Shift to lock it at 90-degree increments, or 45 actually, because that's 45, and flip it over to the right one. So because we didn't, I think I got it in the wrong direction, right? Or no? Our shadows. Had it right the first time. Because of the rotations, right? Our shadows are going to go in another direction because of our shadows want to go that way. But to fit in the grid, we're going to do, I would say we always rotate it clockwise to keep it uniform. So pick one. In this case, we went clockwise, one tick. That way, the rest of these objects in this position across here will be like that. These are all linked files, right? So let's say you've got pretty bad images, or something is not to your liking, and you've got to adjust the levels. Maybe they were all really bright or all really dark or something like that. That's when you could go in and change them all. Do you want to talk about how to do that? Yeah. I mean, we can. We're assuming you guys are like Ansel Adams out there, and your images are going to be like real nice. But what if something you don't know what happens and you need to really fix them all or something like that? So one way to do that would be to open up one of your images that you've got. In my one right there, we've got our output, we've got our better photos, black and white. In this case, they're not really usable, and I'm going to edit my ones directly. Go to one of my typical ones here, and I'm going to go into my levels, so I hit Control L to open up my levels. And what I need to tell the levels is what's the bright part and what's the dark part. The best way I typically do that is you always change your input. You never change your output, because that'll result in your image will have less range to it. So I'm going to pull in what I'm calling my extremes here, and it's going to update it and make my image brighter if I do it on that side. This is telling me my mid-level image right here. And this is telling me what my dark is described as. Some people will use the eyedroppers to do this, but I don't like it because it gives you a different spectrum that's really kind of choppy. But it's all a matter of preference. See, it's really tough to control that, and it gives you really abstract looking stuff. So I don't like to do that. And this is under image adjustment levels.
But in general, and I don't know, I think Alex, you would probably have a take on this too, but you don't want to lose information, right?
Yeah,
like
you don't want to lose info.
Like the spectrum, you're trying to, like, so you can see the image doesn't quite contain any information in this spectrum, but it's taking up information, so you're going to slide this to the point where it actually...
That's almost always the case. You're always ditching...
You bookend it.
Yeah.
And then it's the middle that actually makes the biggest difference. So it's just, if you have an ideally balanced photo, has information across the spectrum, right?
And what I would add to that, oh, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, what about auto levels? Did you ever use just the auto levels? Just for simplicity?
The thing with auto levels is it's image specific. Like it looks at the image and tries to do it.
Like you'll do auto levels one by one.
Yeah, but every time you're doing that, we want to compare apples to apples. So if we decide that this is a good leveling, we want to apply it to all the images so we can still compare them to each other.
And maybe a way of refining that
Yeah.
is by photo shoot. And what I mean by that is you have the advantage of these numbers right here. So if you record them within a photo shoot, you can actually get the same consistency by adjusting to each one of those already, pre-canned decisions that you make. So if you decide that 11 and 183 and 0.87 are good and they work, then apply it to the entire photo shoot that you do at that, which would be what, 4 images, right? So does that make sense? Yeah. So then within that grouping, you've got them all consistent.
So that's when it comes back to what we talked about in the batch itself, right? So if that's our 8 a.m. photo shoot, instead of this being a one-off, we can go into our windows and look at let's see, actions. See where that custom RGB is? That's all the presets it came with. There's a folder called default actions. I'm going to do a new folder called my actions. Yeah, my style. And I'm going to do a new one. And I'm going to call it 8 a.m. levels. And I'm going to hit record. It's going to go red down there. And then I'm going to open up my levels and do the adjustment that we talked about. I find the numbers that I like. And if that's something that I like, I hit OK. Then I save it. Then I stop recording. And this action now contains levels with those numbers that we talked about. And it saves the new one. right? So then when we go back into our automate and batch Mike's actions, it's like, hey, you like that? I'm assuming you want to do it a couple more times. So I'm going to look at this, and it says include subfolders, all that other kind of stuff. In this case, I've already done it to one of them. It's not really going to hurt it because it's already been done to it. So I can choose my folder, and under my beta folders 8 a.m. I say okay. And it's opening them and doing those adjustments and saving them out. Okay, so now
Did you guys follow some of this, right? So what we're trying to present is there's an automated, like you can be very systematic about it, kind of how to structure the thing, but there's entirely nothing wrong with if you have to repeat it 16 times.
Yeah.
Of all the
as long as you're consistent with
We're
it,
just
it makes
presenting
sense to you.
A way that could like either give you a way of kind of understanding like it's the same to all of it. There's a way of structuring this, a way of doing it. If you've never done this before, this might seem a bit overwhelming, but it's a good intro for you guys to see. There's more to Photoshop than like cropping out bad hair.
Red eye,
Right?
yeah.
And red eye.
Mm-hmm. So we've done some editing to our images, and if we look at those, well, I closed them so we can't, but if we look at these here, I could have left them open. I just closed them out. When we look at our window, and there's a window for our links we're going to open up. We look at the ones in particular here. They've updated. We can always check and see, and if any changes have been made.
Right, so once you have it linked to Illustrator and you're making the changes to the folder with the Photoshop, it's linked, it will update your Illustrator. So you don't have to like, oh, I adjusted my levels now,
Yeah.
do the whole thing again.
Yeah.
It's like you can place it almost like a color right off the can into Illustrator, go into Photoshop, have it properly linked, and it will do the thing in Illustrator. So there's a kind of built-in intelligence that the two actually talk to each other via a folder of images.
Yeah.
That make sense? It took me like 10 years to get this. You guys are getting it in 45 minutes.
Yeah.
I was going to ask the grid, the size of it.
5.5 by 7.5. But you'll have this template available.
If you change the levels for 8 a.m., would you do the same numbers for all 16 photos?
I don't think so. You go into a specific time frame and say like within that, it seems that's the same photo.
That worked for 8 a.m.
That works only for 8 a.m.
Yeah.
Keep it consistent with the
Correct.
rotation.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we kept it consistent in that respect. Let's look at the image. It looks a little light. I'm wondering why it's not making it a little darker. Should be a little darker than that. I'm not sure. It's not giving me
On
the.
your screen or the projector?
It looks darker here, right? It should be
Oh, yeah.
updating, but it's not giving me any kind of.
Relink.
Is it linked?
No,
Oh, update the link.
it's not giving me the option that it's not updated. So that's
Save it.
yeah, but because I just opened it up again, it's being a little lazy because it would normally give us an option right here to that it needs updating.
If you double hit image in the actual layer, yeah, go there.
Modified.
Times modified.
That's
weird.
right, 3 minutes ago. So let's just give me an old. Let's save it and.
Another way is like move the original somewhere else, and it will ask you to relink.
Yeah, and we can relink it in the same place too. We were hoping not to have to do that, but if we got to, we got to.
Question.
Yeah.
When you cropping the picture, are you trying to capture all the shadows that you have? Or do you keep some out based on the
Ye-
size of the
I would say you want to be consistent with how we crop, and I think later in the day you're going to have like shadows that go beyond the captured range, right? So I would just be consistent. I think you have a reference of the board that it's on, right? And proportionally the 5.5 by 7.5 is the same, right? So you can technically kind of just crop around the frame. But with photo shoots, right, like you have it slightly off, you know, that's like 3 degrees off the horizontal. So you have to rotate it slightly. So yes, you will lose this stuff right here. That's okay.
So with that, do you have, can you, in Illustrator, can you actually put the coordinates in as a number so you have a consistent frame around it?
Not that I know. I mean,
Because I
the
was trying to
clipping
figure
mask,
that
yes,
out.
you can be consistent, but then the scaling of the image, I think you do manually.
Yeah,
This
there's
is one pass, and then I think what you're still going to go do is make these images line up, right, like that.
Yeah.
That this is the same size, right? So you do it in the vertical and the horizontal.
So, just trying to figure out. That one's just updated, but I had to relink it.
It's being lazy.
It's being really lazy. Not sure why it's doing that, but it is doing that.
I gotta get my Louis pointer.
But this is your backup plan. Your backup plan, if it's not updating, is to just pick it and repoint it to the right one. And so just say relink. And I'm pointing it to the same file. My computer might be tired. It had a long weekend as well, so I put it through the ringer. So what we need to talk about is what happens at the bottom. So in order to do that, I'll run this process one more time and talk about how I got that kind of aligned version in there. So that would be 4A that I want. What also happens is when you use the clipping mask, its properties disappear. So when I look at the stroke on this, it's a 1-point stroke that's black, but the clipping mask, the stroke starts to disappear. When I click on the clipping mask, it's just become this shape, and where it says stroke, you see how it's blank up there? There's no stroke left to it because it's treating it as an object now. You can get the stroke back by just hitting up on the arrow, and now it'll have that black outline again. So now that stroke outline has returned. And the same thing with the clipping mask on the clipping path on 1A. I click on it. It's always easier at this point to click on the layer itself than the object, because the object is now tiled and overlaid with stuff. I'm changing it to 1A. And I'm changing the path down here to 3A. So my 3A option down here, take the path. I'm going to apply the clipping mask to it. Put the path above it and apply it. Change the stroke to 1, and I want 1 more. So I'm going to do file place. And well, hopefully this, since we've saved it, this other one should already be at the correct darkness in there. Yeah, it is. So that's rotated. We're going to rotate it clockwise. Find where my image is. My image got brought into the wrong layer at this point. Brought into the frames layer. Just drag it into the proper one. So our proper one's 4A. A's path is not there yet. I'm going to grab its path, which is right there, bring it in. You always want to, the layer management is the most amount of work you want to put into this, because then everything becomes really simple. Then I can just apply the mask. Now it's applied, I can lock the path and just adjust the image until it's the way I like it. Yep.
I have to press shift right when I decrease the size,
Shift.
so it can't be proportional.
Yep. You want to always be proportionate, and the shift is going to do that, and the alt does it from the center. So I'm holding shift and alt at the same time. Very important. So this is getting closer. You can see that the time's consistent. My rotations are changing. These shadows are going to match up across the time. So it's not like my sun is in another world. I just have all the images rotated kind of consistently. And the good thing about that is my darker shadows kind of make sense coming earlier in the day because they're deeper, happening up here versus down here.
There was something that the first image right there,
Mm-hmm.
different orientation. Yeah. Is that here?
Yeah.
Two and three are the same.
They're all different orientation.
No, 1 and 4.
1 and 4 are,
Yeah.
All four are different rotations. The bottom two have been rotated. Right? A is the same rotation. This is all 8 a.m. This is all the 4 different positions for 8 a.m. Yeah. So when these came in, they came in like that. And their see how their shadows match up? Their orientations are supposed to change. They're all 8 a.m., all 4 different orientations for 8 a.m.
Yes.
Just consistent. They always have the same orientation. And then that way you can see the shadow. So you're always having the same time.
The shadow only moves this way. So when we bring in the next time, the shadow's going to move. Right? It's set up the way that we want it to fit the grid. We can talk about it if you want to discuss it. We can talk about it if we want to allow that. I'm open to the discussion of it.
Same, but I think it's important that everyone understands how you arrange it, right? Like so,
Yeah.
column 1 right here is all 8 a.m. Correct? So B, this will be the second time right there. It was at 11 a.m. The orientation of the photo is going to do what? So the orientation along this side is always the same. Along this side is always the same, right?
The discussion might be, though, for the fifth one, this might be the preferred setup. But no, it won't be. It won't. That's a.
The preferred setup for five is actually that the orientation is all the same.
Yeah.
The shadows that they measure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you want us to do top, bottom, right, left in that order, going from 1 to 4? Because like on mine, it's top, right, bottom, left. The way I position my photo.
That's all semantics. What's the top and what's the bottom? Right?
Well, because like right there, I can see how to rotate the 2 bottom ones. If I
Yeah.
put mine in, I would have to rotate number 2 and number 4.
Yeah. So maybe you keep the bottom 2 as the ones that need to be rotated. Yep. I think for clarity, what we could do, Philip, is chop off this one and just do the 5th column and not the 5th row. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, I see. Yeah. Yeah. Centered, so yeah. clip the other one.
Right.
Yeah.
So we do this one.
Yeah.
And just do
Yeah,
this one.
like that.
Yeah.
Correct. Then the orientation's out the same.
Yeah. So let's do that.
It would make more sense if they're all in the same position. And just the shadows.
They're going to be in the same position this way.
Yep.
Do the fifth overlay on this end.
Yep. So let's set up one of those.
Like this.
Yeah, correct. Like you do this one is up. All right, guys. We're just, I guess we're clarifying our own here, and that is the position is always, or that, let's say the, I get the terms wrong too. It's like the times are always the same orientation, right? The position is the thing that changes, right?
Just depends on what direction you're going, right?
So if you went left or right, it doesn't matter as long as you're consistent with it, because the shadow will tell you what happened, right? So the orientation here is always the same. Orientation this one is always the same. This is the same.
So we'll fill out the row real quick
Yeah.
to add some clarity to that. Put that on there.
Right,
So we've got a path
the
there.
fifth is a composite one,
So we say place.
and then that's where you overlay the whole thing.
Yeah. So 8 a.m. We're done with 8 a.m. We go to 10 a.m.
Just to me doesn't make sense that 1 and 4 are different than 2 and 3. Because
So would you change?
Just for the sake of the grid.
you know what I mean?
So maybe, Mike, in terms of order of operations, would you do a batch just into the levels or bringing those in to their layers or linking them in?
You could. You could. It shouldn't matter. For some reason, mine was acting up.
Yeah.
But the other, we can do that. So, the other thing I can do is just open 10 a.m. and you open them all
Yeah.
and take a look at them. Those are a little darker already. I don't even know if I would change those. But for sake of repetition, maybe we do it. And I grab it and I say, I go into my windows and my actions and I record a new one. And then I do my levels. I hit Control L, do my levels, and I bring it in a little bit. And I bring it in a little bit. And I hit find what I like. And I hit OK. And I save it. And I stop it. And then in my automation, I go to batch. And I actually, by doing that, I just added it to this existing one. So let me call this one 10 a.m. levels. And I recorded it over I recorded it at the bottom of my old one, so I'm just turning it into my new one. And I'm going to automate batch. So now it'll be able to batch the other ones.
Is it gonna affect the 8 a.m. ones though?
No, it's just an action. Those are already closed, those aren't open. All I did was, it's like overwriting a script. I just replaced it with a new one and said, instead of doing this, do this. Instead of choosing the folder, since I got them open, I could just say open files, destination, close them when I'm done. So the open files will just get leveled and closed. You'll see it pop a level real quick and then close. So like Alex saying, now that they're done, we can go in there and then take my 10 a.m. ones. But I want to actually do the ones going across, so I'm not going to play with the levels anymore, so I can fill up one of these kind of rotations, and I'm going to be picking the first ones from each time. So when I go to place this, I'm going to do my 10 a.m. on my first one. That's in there. And I look at where it's at, right? It's on, this is under 1B. And then I'm also going to go and look at 1C, which is right next to it. Its friend right there. And place that in there. And this time I'm going to jump over to the next time and pick the first one. So it looks like 12 p.m. is the next time. Pick that one. Put it over there in a kind of general area. Under 1C, my path goes above it. I select that layer and I clip it. Go on to the next one, that's 1D. What are we doing? We're going to go to the next time, right? We're going to go up to 2 p.m. Pick the first image in 2 p.m. and that's my D. I'm going to put the path there, select the layer, clip it. I can do my adjustments there. You can see the ones that haven't been leveled yet. Lock B, lock A. Get these in there a little bit. I can start to see how these shadows are getting shorter, so now it's helpful to use the actual MDF model as a reference. Otherwise, I'll get lost trying to chase shadows that keep changing. It kind of be confusing. The MDF board's a nice kind of reference in that respect. You can see this image got a little shot with a little bit different, but not too bad. And that one's my C, so I can lock that, unlock that, bring that in. Same kind of thing. You'll start to get a feel if you did your images kind of consistently when you took them, how much resizing will get you in the neighborhood. It'll start to feel. And D is right there. Unlock it. And this aspect on C looks a little off. So I'm going to select it and I'm going to relink it to the one that it should be, just to redo it. Actually, I'm going to toss it because it'll keep the aspect ratio, and I'm just going to replace it in 1C, which is 12 p.m. First image at 12 p.m. I think I didn't hold shift down one time when I resized it and it got kind of stretched out. Yeah, that looks better. It looks a little bit more consistent. So my shadows are consistently getting smaller, shorter. That makes sense to me. 2 p.m.'s not that late in the day, but you can see this is when the kind of proof comes out. The shift from 12 to 2, more subtle, right? The big jump from 8 to 10 for sure. So the earlier your images, your first images, the bigger jump it's going to be to the second kind of image that happens in there, right? The cool thing is that with this image, I can look at it. I can go to it and I can look at the link information, and I can. They used to give you the option to edit the original in here. Did they take that out? It's there. It must be because it's in a mask. It won't let you edit the original. But that used to always be an active option in this case. That's the workflow. It's not rocket science. It's a matter of organization. But you can start to track orientation and then track shadows from it.
Did we clear out the right position and time? Time changes, position stays the same, right? So now the fine tuning would be about lining and scaling these that they're all the same, right?
Yeah.
Not the actual photo, but the actual model, right? Like the top clip needs to be aligned with this.
Yeah.
Question jumping to. So you said this grid is going to be available to us. How is it going to be available to us?
How would you like it? No, we're going to put it on a public public folder, public server, shared drive. Marco's volunteered to create a folder. Studio 201.
Yeah, AR201.
AR201. That's where we'll plot
Thanks,
it.
Marco.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, this is
Yeah.
my first few years. I don't know.
Yeah. No, that's a good question. See, you answered it for everyone else because everyone else like, how do I get this?
They don't know.
No, they don't know.
This is their time. You think they did second year last year? They didn't do second year last year. They don't know any better.
Shared folder, shared drive. Public,
Main campus share.
Something like that.
You go
Find it.
main campus share. You just go into the computer lab. There's a shortcut on the desktop. Main campus share.
Main campus share.
That's it.
Just a small little file on the desktop.
Yes.
Yep.
Campus share.
Easy. So
There'll be a folder AR201, and the template will be available to you guys.
is this thing done?
No,
Why are we talking like it's done?
I know. What's that? Today. Today. Part 2.
What goes on in the last one?
Question: do we create a?
I already asked a question. Right? Give me an answer. Let's
keep
quid
going.
pro quo. What happens to the last one?
We keep the level. We create a level for each time.
We create a level for each time.
Right. Like, do you have a one consistent level for your?
That sounds like a question, though. Doesn't it sound like he's asking me a question?
Yeah, I'm asking. Do you keep?
I'm asking you what happens on E in this row right here. I'm asking everybody.
You merge them all together.
Yeah.
Composite image of all of them, right? So we want to see them together so we can see the overall effect that happens in one image. Correct. Yeah, we talk about the kind of opacity that happens in that, right? So there's typically when you have two softwares that work friendly together, you've got two ways to do things, right? You'll see this a lot when you deal with Photoshop and Illustrator. I do it in Photoshop, I do it in Illustrator. There's pluses and minuses. Sometimes it's a matter of which one you're the most comfortable with. We tend to like to do things more in Illustrator because they're vector-based and link-based, so we can always kind of go back and do it. Photoshop tends to be one way because you're dealing with pixels. So once you do something, there's lots of things like flattening and everything else. There tend to be one-way streets. Also, Photoshop files are massive because they have to remember every bitmap. Instead of using things like links and vectors, which are based on numbers and magnitude, it's saving literal squares of color, which can get into massive sizes of things, right? It's rasterized. So we like to work in Illustrator as much as possible for that reason. One way that we could start to do that is to take these things, and I'm going to make a little artboard over here just to clarify and not work on top of myself here. So I'm going to just give you, I'm just doing it to have that white space that's there. And if we take a look at what we've got here, we've got 4 of these guys. I'm going to unlock the ones that are locked. We've got 1A, 1B, all that stuff through D. E is just number 1E, although I did mistakenly put some text in 1E that's supposed to go up on labels. Let's put that up there. Should just have the path. Let's take another look. So we got a path, and we got that guy. So that guy's label. Lock that back on the path. All right, just that. He's empty, but I do have these 4. It's very tricky to try to pick things by looking at them. You're never exactly sure what you're grabbing, so it's always a little bit easier to grab stuff by the layer themselves. If I hold down Shift here, I can grab all 4 objects, right? And I can kind of bring them over. I'm going to hold down Alt to make a copy of them. Oops, I still didn't have everything. So it's always tricky.
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't like this.
Yeah. Because they're not flattened out, huh?
Yeah.
I don't want to slam it down there though, because I want to keep them.
Yeah.
Here's the other thing I can do is work in the layer themselves. So instead of copying the objects, I copied their layers instead. And I did that in the layer editor. I selected the layers themselves, and I use this option here, duplicate selection, and that's going to duplicate the layers. The nice thing about that is, just like on our files, it's duplicating everything, and it's relabeling it copy here, so we always know what we're dealing with. We're not confusing what's going on there, right? So with my copies, I can start looking at how I could possibly start to line these things up. Not sure at first. But we can start to get into the actual appearance of them. So when I pick this layer here, there's this one here that says appearance. If we change our opacity to multiply, we're going to start to make these things multiply upon themselves. So 1A has been multiplied, I lock that, I change to 1B, my appearance there, opacity, I'm clicking on it, I'm changing the mode to multiply. And I lock it, grab the next one. And some of them are behind each other and above each other. And I just do the multiply for the last one as well, opacity. I'm not changing the value yet, I'm just doing the actual behavior. So that when I do it this way, everything on that layer acts in that way. The entire layer is acting that way. So that I'm doing these kind of layer level actions on this thing. So everything's getting multiplied onto itself. When we start to look for the kind of overlays that happen. That Illustrator is the way to do that, and then I can go in and do adjustments based on how much opacity I need. So when I go back and look at the appearance now, it remembers that it's multiply, that 100% is talking about how dark it is. So if I start changing some of the values of how much that image is reading into everything, right, that's what starts to dictate. So I've set 1B at one number, the appearance there. And as I get out of 100, I'm starting to see more of the aggregate effect of it. So that's the Illustrator way to do it. The other way is to take that same thing and do it in Photoshop, where I would open up the images in question. So when we talk about what images to open, we got to open up, if I'm talking about that first one, did we do the first one? We did the first row, right? Which is the 8 a.m. row. or the 8 a.m. or the actual position. So it's the first image in all these. So that one. This is a Photoshop document, right? Photoshop documents have layers to them, just like Illustrator does. So far, we've been treating these Photoshop documents, right, as individual JPEGs and then opening them and closing them. Now it's a Photoshop document. The first thing I did was I duplicated the background by saying duplicate layer, because it locks the background by default. So now I've got a new layer in there. Instead of opening a new file, I do place, just like we did in Illustrator. So this is my first rotation, or my first orientation, right? I'm opening up the next time for the same orientation. It's asking me if I want to place it there, so I hit OK. And as I hit place, it's going to start making new layers on top of it. 12 p.m. See, a new layer pops up there. I hit enter to accept it. Otherwise, I can't add more stuff. Place. And the last one is the first image at 2 p.m. So it looks kind of exactly like what we did in the Illustrator, in that we're taking all these things and placing them on top of each other, and it kind of starts to work that way too. So now when we highlight the individual layers, right, we say they all have that option right here: normal, multiply, right, multiply, 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 right? They're all multiplying across there. I can select them all and start looking at their opacity and start to see how much that these opacities are contributing. Right now I'm doing it, if I select them all at the same time, they're all equally the same amount of opacity. That might be the better way to go, because it's kind of treating it a little bit handedly. It's not favoring one over another. And beyond that, it's a matter of adjustments. So I take one image, and what activates it in there is whatever one's active right now. So it always looks like I'm touching the same thing, right? But it's always the active layer is the one that gets manipulated. And then in this case, I've aligned the corners up, and then I can start to transform the object by taking it and transforming it. My graphics card's doing a little bit more. Although I don't do this in Photoshop that often.
Control T, that's all.
Will it work in Photoshop too? Perfect. Yeah, Control T. It's great. So now I'm deciding what should be the right size for these images. I thought you didn't know what was going on. You know exactly what's going on. Picking that size, right? Accepting it. Starting to get these guys a little bit closer to each other. It's going to be doing the same thing. You just have to decide which, interface you might want to do it at, and start finding the ones that the outliers on it. So it looks like this one is the one that needs to get resized. It starts to line up. Shouldn't be rotated because they're all the same rotation at different times.
I think that background layer is different. I think it's a different position.
Sure. That's cool. I'm not getting graded on this, you are. I'm just showing you how to do it.
Alright, so
What about this?
whether it's Photoshop or Illustrator, you might find this more conducive. I think perhaps on that overlay and sizing and opacity that Photoshop seems to be that perhaps more user-friendly, where it's like you got to get a good handle on layer management. And
Yeah, so you got more Illustrator, more layer management. In Photoshop, it's more adjusting and layering in place.
so the fifth column is dedicated towards overlaying all four. Got to carefully craft it. They all got to be the same size. Right.
What other questions do we got on this process? When we have it done, we save it. There's two ways we can go. We're going to link it back in there. We've got once we have a Photoshop file, we can save it as is as a Photoshop file. If we want the layers, there's no time to this, right? And that's going to save all the info, the layers and everything. We want to relink it.
Oh, that's good.
So the same idea, meaning if I still want to go back and adjust this or anything else, the one thing that we can't do is apply like any kind of filters on the entire thing as one thing, because it's not flat. So anything that we do right now will start to, right? It'll actually start to be on one image at a time. So if you wanted a flat version of it to link, you could also save it as a copy, or flatten the image as a flat thing. Going back here, it's just a matter of doing the same thing, doing the placement. Still treating it the same on 1E here. Still just treating it as a simple object that I can clip out there and select on its own. You can see this one's keeping the layered images on top of each other as objects. It's calling it multiple images. And it actually has isolation mode in there, where I've accessed all the originals still. So by keeping it linked, I can still now go in and do these adjustments individually and touch them up, right? So I can get them in the neighborhood, and if I'm not 100% buy in on it, I still go in here and touch it up, right? So you can see up in my organization that I'm inside the Photoshop document because it kept the layer structure. So it'll be like if you brought in a layered drawing or something. So you still have a little bit of flexibility going to tune it once you've got it in there.
So when you save all the multiple layers on top of each other, save it as a Photoshop PDF?
Just as a Photoshop document, just as a PSD, yeah. Which is the default. So if you don't say anything, you just say save, once you have multiple layers on there, it'll just automatically assume you want a PSD file. So it's
Can I merge it?
What's that?
Can I merge them now as a single layer?
You could, but what would be the reason for it? Because when we get the drawing out, we've got to merge it all together anyway. So you might as well just wait till the end. And I mean, you could, but I don't see the benefit of it. But you could, if you really liked it and you thought it looked really good, merge it. You would go layer and you would go flatten image. It's not going to kill you if you think it works, right? You go layer, merge visible or flatten image, and then save it as a PNG or something like that. Yeah. Somebody had their hand raised. Did you raise your save as what? Where? For Photoshop?
Yeah.
It's a Photoshop document. It's just a PSD file. Yeah. You can see that in Illustrator that's what the link is looking at right there. It's treating it as a group. If I double click on it, that's how I get in this isolation mode over here. And that's the layers of it. You got anything else? I think that's the process. That gets us, that fills out our 16 plus extra row. So.
Then the very bottom right one, are you just collecting everything?
No, it only goes left to right, so it's just the same thing for
Okay, so there's not a very
row by row.
Okay.
Yeah, just
So one spreadsheet goes from-
yep.
So you have one thing for all of them, or?
Yep. 4 rows, 5 columns. So this is going to happen for this orientation, right? And then the other orientations as well, tracking across the time. Bless you.
All right.
This takes time. Yours is going to be prettier than mine. For sure.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.